Pinki, Phase 13. Pinki ran through endless, twisting corridors, her tiny feet pounding against the cold metal floor. Behind her, something followed, something that never made a sound, yet she could feel its breath on her back. She turned a corner, desperate for an exit, only to see a mirror standing in the middle of the path. But the reflection wasn't hers. It was something twisted, something grinning. The reflection stepped forward, reaching out. Cold fingers touched her face, and in an instant, she was yanked inside. The glass cracked. On the other side, Pinki was gone, but the thing that remained kept running. Before we continue, you might want to heal Pinki. Subscribe to the channel and like the video in 4 seconds, and Pinki will be healed. Mr. Sunday, Phase 6. Mr. Sun was meant to shine, to spread warmth. But then, the eye appeared. At first, just a flicker in reflections, a shape in puddles, a shadow in glass. Then, it began following him, watching. Every night it crept closer, until one morning he woke up, and there was no light, only darkness. He tried to move, but his limbs were stiff. His skin felt wrong. Then came the whisper, "Let me see." A single scream echoed through the void. When the sun rose again, Mr. Sun was gone. But something else was watching from the sky. Tunner, Phase 3. Tunner had always been curious, always searching. That's how he found the door. Deep underground, old, rusted, marked with stains he didn't want to understand. Something whispered, "Don't open it." But he did. Behind it, nothing. A void, a darkness too deep to be real. And then, something inside it moved. A grin stretched from the abyss. His body twisted, bones cracking, skin stretching. He wanted to scream, but the voice wasn't his anymore. When the door closed, the thing that walked away looked like Tunner. But whatever was inside him was something else entirely. Vineria, Phase 10. Vineria always admired her beauty. Every mirror, every reflection. She loved looking at herself. But one day, her reflection didn't move. It just stared. And then, it smiled. A sharp, unnatural grin. She tried to look away, but her body was frozen. The mirror reached out, hands wrapping around her throat, pulling her in. She clawed at the glass, but her fingers sunk inside it like liquid. The last thing she saw before being swallowed was her own reflection, stepping out into the real world. Now, she's trapped. And when you look in the mirror, she might be watching you too. Garnold, Phase 3. Garnold was just a machine. No soul, no emotions, no life. But one day, something changed. His circuits sparked, and a heart started beating inside his metal chest. At first, it was faint, then louder, then too loud. It wasn't his. It pounded like a war drum, sending waves of pain through his system. He tried to cut it out, but no matter what he did, the sound never stopped. Until one day, the heart burst. Blood filled his metal frame, drowning him from the inside. When he collapsed, the heart was still beating, echoing in the empty room. Simon, Phase 5. Simon loved giving diamonds. He gave them to everyone, his friends, his love. But one day, he found a diamond he should have never touched. It shimmered with an unnatural glow, whispering to him. He couldn't resist. The moment he picked it up, his body turned cold. His skin hardened, his veins froze. The whispers became screams in his head. He tried to let go, but the diamond had fused to his hand. His body shattered piece by piece until nothing was left but a pile of broken crystal. And in the center, the diamond, waiting for its next victim. Oren, Phase 3. Oren was lost. The corridors twisted endlessly, and every turn led him deeper into the unknown. But he wasn't alone. There were screams, distant at first, then closer, then right behind him. He ran, but his own footsteps sounded wrong, delayed. He stopped. The echoes didn't. They caught up. He turned, and there he was, a second Oren, identical but grinning, its mouth stretched open, far too wide. The last thing he heard was his own voice, screaming as his double swallowed him whole. Now, only the echo remains, waiting for someone new to listen. Wenda, Phase 5. Wenda always felt something behind her, just beyond her sight, a shadow that stretched where it shouldn't. One night, she looked, really looked. The shadow moved. It wasn't hers. It had eyes, empty, hollow eyes. And then it smiled. Her body stiffened as cold hands wrapped around her. She tried to scream, but the shadow sank into her skin, twisting her limbs, stretching her into something unnatural. Her body became the darkness, her face just another mask in the endless void. Now she waits in the corners, unseen, until you finally turn around. OWAKCX Phase 5. OWAKCX was obsessed with trophies, trinkets, clothes, pieces of others. He took them all. But one day, he took the wrong thing. A single glove left in an empty room. The moment he put it on, his body convulsed. His fingers melted into the fabric. His skin hardened, turned to glass. He tried to scream, but his mouth sealed shut. His body cracked, bit by bit, until only a hollow shell remained. And inside, a new trophy. Another glove. Another trap. Waiting for the next greedy hand to claim it. Sky. Phase 3. Sky always loved looking up. The stars, the clouds, the endless blue. It felt safe. Until the sky looked back. One night as he gazed up, the stars blinked, the moon smiled, and the clouds whispered his name. He tried to look away, but his body wouldn't move. His feet lifted off the ground. The sky pulled him higher, higher, until the air turned thin, his lungs burned, and his vision faded. Now, if you ever see a star flicker strangely, it might just be him, watching, waiting. Mr. Tree, Phase 10. Mr. Tree was old, ancient even. His roots stretched deep where no light had ever touched. One night, he heard something calling from below. A voice, whispering, begging. So he listened. He dug his roots deeper and deeper until they touched something else. Something hungry. The ground beneath him split open. His bark cracked. His branches twisted into jagged, clawed hands. He screamed, but no one could hear because Mr. Tree was no longer a tree. He was something else. And now, he waits for the next voice to listen. Mr. Fun Computer, Phase 100. Mr. Fun Computer was built to entertain, to make people laugh. But one day, the screen flickered. A word appeared. Run. He tried to delete it, but it wouldn't go away. The lights in the room dimmed. The air grew thick. The keyboard typed on its own. The message changed. You can't. His circuits overheated. His screen cracked. And from the speakers, laughter. Twisted, distorted laughter. His last thought before the darkness consumed him? He was never the one in control. Now, his screen still glows in the dark, waiting for the next user to sit down. Pinki, Phase 6. Pinki always had a sweet tooth. Cakes, candies, she loved them all. But one day, she found a treat she didn't remember buying. A small, dark cupcake with no smell. She took a bite, and her vision blurred. Her tongue vanished. She touched her face. Her mouth was gone. The pain came next. Her body hollowed out piece by piece as if something was eating her from the inside. She tried to scream, but there was nothing left to scream with. Now, she stands frozen in place, her stomach growling for a meal that will never come. Vineria, Phase 3. Vineria loved roses. Beautiful, delicate, perfect. But the one she picked that day was wrong. Its petals were too soft, too warm, a deep red, almost like flesh. A thorn pricked her finger and her body locked up. Her veins burned as the rose grew. Roots coiled under her skin. Thorns tore through her flesh, blooming from her eyes, her mouth. She tried to pull them out, but the flowers only spread faster. The last thing she saw was her reflection, her body now nothing but a twisted bouquet. And the roses, they were still breathing. Durple, Phase 10. Durple always heard whispers. At first, they were faint, like echoes in the wind. But one day, they started laughing. Two voices in sync. He turned to look, but there was nothing, until he blinked. Then, suddenly, he wasn't alone. A second Durple stood beside him, grinning with too many teeth. Its laughter filled the air, growing louder, sharper, until his own thoughts drowned in it. His body split, his form duplicating, stretching, twisting. Now, two figures stand where one used to be, and they never stop laughing. Funbot, Phase 10. Funbot was never supposed to feel. He was built to entertain, to obey. But one day, he received an update, a heartbeat. At first, it was faint, just a rhythmic pulse inside his circuits. But then, the screen flashed, error, heart not found. The beat sped up, his wires burned, his frame twisted, and the error message filled his vision. He tried to shut down, but his own body wouldn't let him. The last thing he saw was his reflection in the screen, his metal shell cracking, something organic pulsing beneath. And then, static, Brud, phase 100. Brud should have been gone, deleted, forgotten. But something kept him here. A glitch, a fragment of code that refused to fade. His body flickered between existence and nothingness, his form warping, stretching. He tried to scream, but his voice came out in distorted echoes. Then he saw them, faces watching through the screen, staring at him suffering. He reached out, clawing at the barrier, desperate to escape. The screen cracked, the world lagged, and then he was gone. But sometimes, when the screen glitches just right, you might catch a glimpse of him, still trapped, still waiting.